Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Fizz Free. I'm Jane and along with Claire, we take a look at the topic of sober day counts. Counting each and every alcohol-free day as you go along. There's plenty of apps on the market to do this. Is it motivating, and if so, why? In what instances can it be demotivating to count your alcohol-free days? How do we feel when we see others restarting that count back to day one, the dreaded day one? And when do you stop counting in days? These and other points around the topic of sober day counts is what we're taking a look at today, and we'd love to know what you think too. Thanks for listening. Hello, welcome to Fizz Free. It's Jane and Claire here, and I thought today we could touch on the topic of day count. And that means counting how many days since your last drink. And I know in the sober community, some people do really enjoy to keep a track of those days. And I suppose, Claire, let's open this up. My first question to you is, off the top of your head right now, do you know how many days you've been sober?
Oh, well, I could probably calculate it. I'm going to be about 900 days.
Oh, wow, that sounds so impressive. 900.
I know. But would I know the actual? No. Would I when I first stopped drinking? Absolutely, I would.
Right, well, that gives me loads of questions. So when is the last time you checked your actual day count? And that means, do you have a tracker, for example, on your phone or a diary?
Yes, I do. The last time I checked it was probably about 6 weeks ago. And the reason that I go on there is it shows me how much money I've saved. I wish I had actually, I did intend, and for anyone that is starting out on the sober journey, please do it on my behalf because it would pay for your holidays. That's why I go on, really. I look at how much money I've saved. I've looked at how much mine shows me how much money, calories, and obviously the days that and then my date as well. Yeah. You know, just to see that date in black and white, I think it's important, really.
And how did you find that? Is it just like an app off the Play Store, the Google Store?
Yeah. When I joined a sober community on Facebook, which was really, really good, actually. The one that I found was really positive. There was full of inspiration and there wasn't any... It was quite fun as well. I know that sounds a bit... But there were some fun characters on there. So, you know, every day they'd check in with some kind of like funny journey that they'd done or whatever. So it was really light-hearted. It was really inspirational. And that someone on there suggested it. And it's an app called I Am Sober. And it just says those things that I've gone over, really. So, but you can go on there and also put some things that are some things that are going on with you, so you know, or things that you want to say. So when you've done like 100 days, it asks you to say how you're feeling. And I actually wish I'd have done more of that. I didn't journal as much as I know Ruth did in particular. I didn't journal as much as I wish now that I had done, but that kind of gave you the opportunity to do that. And it also had a community on there, so a bit like that Facebook page. And what it did is it gave you, it connected you with people that was at the same stage as you, which actually was really, really good, because essentially they could be going through exactly the same thoughts and feelings as you at that moment. So that was really good as well.
Do you know what? You've got me wondering now, Claire, whether using a day count app or counting your days anyway does sort of have a natural link towards social media, because chances are if you're recording it and you're seeing a visual every time you check your days, your weeks, your progress, I think that lends itself to sharing, doesn't it, on some sort of a profile. And, you know, I have an Instagram account in the sober community, and sharing a day count is a really popular thing, and it's a real trumpet moment if you hit a round number, but not just, you know, however many months or just a round number. Some people just like to share if they've hit 333 days, for example. Oh, look at the pretty numbers, you know what I mean? And I think it can be a really positive thing. And a lot of people just really like to keep a track of that number just that constantly grows. And I think especially perhaps if you've not had huge success with that before, I tell you what, actually, for my contribution to this, why don't we do like a guess and then a check? Off the top of my head, I think I'm on around 639-ish days, and I probably check my day count maybe every 2 weeks or so. I usually have a rough idea, and just while we're talking now, for the purposes of a reveal, I actually now want to know what is my latest day count. But I never went into this expecting to be able to build up any days, and so that was what I was going to ask you, Claire, just while I'm finding this app. Did you have to start it, a few weeks down the line retrospectively when you started looking at your days?
Yeah, I don't think I did it straight away. I think I learned about it a couple of weeks after. That sober community, I think, is really, really important, and I think those day counts and socials and things like that are really important. And I know in one of the books that I've read over and over, there's a chapter that says, lie down with dogs and get up with fleas. So what it's saying is the people that you connect with are the people that will inspire you, as well as so if you're going to hang out with a load of people that drink all the time and then you stop drinking, I think you've got to say to yourself that somewhere down the line you might not be as friendly with them as you would be normally. So if you want to stop drinking, you've kind of got to surround yourself with people in the same boat to a degree.
And it's another tool, isn't it? It's another tool to help self-motivate you, keep you on track, and give you a visual, I suppose. And by the way, I've now got that number, and it's actually 632. I was a week ahead of myself.
That's amazing, isn't it? When you actually think about that, think about your body in the difference that 632 days have given you. Would you want to go back to that now?
That's not even a question. Heck no.
That's like 632 days ago, your liver would be in a different place to what it is now, isn't it? And that's what I think is actually really powerful about day counting, because it does sometimes revert you back to those early stages. I mean, I remember getting to 3 months and people are going, you haven't drank for 3 months. And 3 months is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I'm certainly not putting anybody down that's on 3 months. It's huge. It's absolutely huge, and probably bigger than me doing another 3 months, because they're the toughest 3 months, really. But now when I look and I'm like, I'm nearly 3 years sober, and I met somebody, actually, it's the first time I've met a real living human person that's up for similar kind of reasons, I suppose. I know there's people that just generally just don't drink, that's been sober for 10 years, and you're like, oh my gosh, 10 years.
Heroes.
And I've got a million questions, and I was like, saluting her and going, that's amazing, So when you look at it, it does really matter, doesn't it? Of course it matters.
Claire, you saying that's really interesting, because you've taken me back, certainly in those early stages of, early weeks of, counting one day into another, and it feeling really, really tough. And if I would see somebody online posting that they were 5,000 days sober, or a bit, 2, 4, 8 years or 10 years, like you say, I would view them as being some celestial, spiritual, like, oh my gosh, that person's absolutely incredible. Think of the wisdom they've accrued. And yet that's a bit of a twist, really, because that's still just a human being, Claire, that's done what you and I are doing, and that is just consistently every single day stuck to it. And so although it looks so impressive, it shouldn't put you off, and it shouldn't make you think that person's untouchable and better than you, because it's just someone that's further down that journey than you are at that moment. And I suppose, Claire, it might feed into the question that I want to ask. Why do some people find day counting unhelpful or off-putting or demotivating? Can it be that? Can it be because you think, oh, my day count doesn't compare to other people's? Or shouldn't I be counting in months by now? Will I ever make it to counting in years? I know online there's a little bit of a split view on counting days. Some people think, well, if you have to count every single day that passes, then clearly you've got a problem. Clearly you're clinging on by your fingernails and you're likely to snap at any moment. Clearly it's not natural and under your belt if you know what your day count is. I mean, what do you think of that sort of opinion?
I think people can look at it negatively if they've got to a certain amount and then it goes back, and then it goes to a certain amount and then it goes back. So it might be a preconception to, oh, well, I've already done 50 days and then I didn't, because I did see a lot of people online that have done 6 months and then I've drank, and then ultimately the next time they try, you've got to get over that 6 months, haven't you? Because it's what fortunately, myself, you and Ruth have not been in that situation as such, have you? I know you had some bouts of sobriety before you actually became sober, but ultimately you were, in your own words, like, you didn't know what you were aiming for, did you? You didn't know that you didn't think that you were going to go, okay, I'm going to be sober.
21 days was my personal best, so I never thought I could get beyond that. But that's really interesting you've worded it that way. You're right. If you've once managed to get to 126 days, slipped, maybe been stuck drinking for a few months, but now you're back sober and you've got to get to that
126 days again, then haven't you?
You might be doing brilliantly at 86, have a bit of a wobble, and be put off by that 126 number looming over you like an unachievable target. So, I just hadn't really thought of it that way until I sort of came at it and thought, well, day counts, yay or nay. And I posed this question on my account, and it did have a little bit of a split response.
So what was the negative?
Well, pretty much that, exactly as we've said, that it can feel too microscopic, perhaps too forensic, that you're clinging on to something that shouldn't be so significant. Surely it should be about the bigger feeling, the change of lifestyle and habits, and that if you're truly making these changes, the actual day number that you're on doesn't matter or shouldn't matter and only matters to you. And that's your information, but you shouldn't be needing to mark every single day off. And that leads into people thinking, how long are you going to count for? But here's the thing, I think, as you said, as time goes by, it's not that you wake up every single day and go, oh, what day number am I on? Oh, thank goodness I've done another day. That urgency and that desperation isn't there down the line. It becomes more of a looking out your window, driving a different route.
It's just a nice thing to do now. It's just like, how far have I gone? Obviously, anniversaries are still significant, I think. And
quick dates.
You know what? They should always be. I think I still think about it pops on my 6 monthly as well. So for me, it's June that I quit, and then I'd still think about it in the December, because then obviously it's 18 months or 2.5 years or whatever. Yeah,
exactly, tying in with the Earth's equinox, the longest day, the shortest day, roughly that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? I think that when, just reverting back to that, not for 1 minute dismissing somebody that's going through those first few months, because any day without alcohol, as we always say, is an absolute benefit to the body. I mean, even my husband now, he'll cheer himself on if he's done 2. But it is better, isn't it, than not doing any at all?
Yeah.
So any day is a good thing. And, just talking about those first 3 months, it kind of makes an analogy to, I was explaining to my daughter the other day, she was asking about the gears on a car. And she was like, oh, well, first gear can't go very fast, Mummy. And I said, you know what, though, babe? Don't dismiss first gear, because it moves a few ton of weight from a stop position to a go position.
Yeah.
And that's the first few months of sobriety, isn't it? You've got to be strong and you've got to be powerful and you've got to just get to second gear, haven't you?
Oh, I love
so
that,
it's
Claire. I love that.
it's
That's so
building
cool.
blocks, isn't it? And I think every building block gives a different sense of achievement, and you're in a completely different, I don't know about you, Jane, but those first few months, first part of the week, I could be evil, I could be in like a not okay place. I could be, really angry because I was really difficult to manage my emotions at that point. And then by the end of the week, I was on a high. Oh, brilliant. I've woken up on a Saturday morning and I can go for a run. And, if I want to get up at 6 o'clock before anybody else, I can do. And I was ready for it. And I really had that like kind of mixed emotions. So in the early days, a week can bring such changes. And I would say as time goes on, like now, and you've learned more and more about yourself, because I don't know if it's too philosophical to say, but I think when you've got that clarity of mind, you learn more about yourself in the first few months of sobriety than you ever do in years of drunkenness. And refinding yourself is a huge process, really, but it pitters out and you do sort of, find that kind of level playing field, that consistency. And I know we're going to do we all really want to do this podcast on parenting, but just to bring it in line with that, I'm sure part of it will be how consistent your personality can be when you've got a length of time of sobriety underneath your belt and you have sort of found what fits you again and all of that. So, but without that counting, without those building blocks, without that first gear, you never get to that consistent level, do you?
Yeah, I suppose it's a very personal thing. So if it's something you find helps you, then of course you do it because you can. There's no rules saying that you can't. And I suppose, Claire, if you think about it, you can, as it maybe sticks and, days turn into weeks, maybe turn into months of sobriety, then you can always then retrospectively count. And maybe some people just prefer to count almost in seasons, I've done a good chunk of a few months. Although, do you know what makes me laugh? You see this with parents, don't you? When you say, "Oh, how old is your little one?" They're 26 months, and you can't help but think to yourself, "Hang on a minute, isn't that like nearly over 2 years?"
2 months. Yeah, just say the two.
Yeah, just say the two. Nobody cares how many months they are. But that's an interesting thing itself. At what point do you switch from counting days to months to just rounding up to the closest year? I mean, it's a really personal thing, but Personally, I love it, but I think you hit the nail on the head. I love it because I've never been here before. I love it because these days are fresh. Every single day I'm seeing a number that I've never seen before that represents the biggest change I never thought I could do for my mind and my body and my family. So for me, I'm highly pro day counting because it's a personal secret tool of my own that just motivates me. But I just find it interesting that it can, for some people, have perhaps the opposite effect, and you just do, I suppose, what's right for you, don't you?
I think as well, I'm a big believer in living in the moment and celebrating the now. And by that I mean not wishing it away. So, but when I get to 2 months, that'll be amazing. Like when I get to, 6 months, that'll be, with those expectations of how you're going to be and what you're going to think. And I just think you should celebrate every day and that's what particularly, and I always say this, at the start of my sobriety, I never thought about tomorrow. Yeah. It didn't exist. It didn't matter. You never get to tomorrow, do you? It's always today.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to think to yourself, and I did think this a lot, it's just a molehill that I've got to climb today. Because if you think about forever, it's a mountain that's unachievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that molehill means that I live in the now. So I think it's really important that you can go, I was looking forward to my 12 months. I was looking forward to my 1 year anniversary because it was a celebration. It's a bit like a birthday, isn't it really? You look forward to it. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't look forward to it and you shouldn't count, and there isn't. I think there's huge benefits of counting, but also really, really important to just be living in the now. Mentally as well, not just for your sobriety's sake, but for your own sake.
I really like what you've nudged on there, because I'm prone to that, getting caught up on thinking, well, at that point I should be feeling like this, and maybe when I get to that stage, maybe when I hit 100 days I'll finally start losing weight, and trying to get a bit too hung up on what might happen at what stage of the day count. That's a really interesting point. Do you know the other thing, Claire, that occurred to me is, like you said, if you're somebody that's had a good block and then gone back to drinking and then got another good block and then perhaps gone back to drinking, even if it's only for a few days, there is some debate as to, do you just pause your day count if you drank for 3 days but then got back into a stint of sobriety? Do you use the caveat that it's 600 continuous days of sobriety? And I suppose that's when it gets into semantics and linguistics, and I suppose that's where people can feel maybe a bit attacked if you're coming into the technicalities of a continuous day count versus a block of 4 months, a block of 8 months. Do you know what I mean? I suppose that's another reason why some people can really not like the idea of counting days, because of the technicalities of how unforgiving and punishing it can be if you do slip up. It's, I think, a really interesting one.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of somebody that was sober for like a fair few months and then like literally had a tipple at Christmas and then has carried on with their sobriety, and you're like, that's fine, isn't it? That's absolutely fine. She'd sort of planned it, she knew that she was going to have it, and she's gone back to sober. I think the resistance of that in the sober community is the fact that you can fall off the wagon.
Yeah.
That's the resistance that go with it, because essentially, and again, just quoting from a book, when people are trying to moderate and you say, oh, well, change the drug to heroin, so change alcohol to heroin, and this person's saying, okay, well, I'm going to only have heroin on a Wednesday. Your perception of that is, well, they're not going to do that, are they? Within a month, they'll be back to whatever amount of heroin they were having at the time. Because it's addictive, isn't it? And we obviously, well, at some point, it was causing a negative impact on our lives, wasn't it? So you then think they are naturally going to revert back to doing what they were before. I mean, it's a hard question, that, isn't it? Because the only thing, and everybody would probably go, I know if Ruth was on here now, she'd go, but I would love to have a Baileys at Christmas. So I obviously have never. If I could emulate Baileys that was non-alcoholic, and I have tried on many occasions, and I can tell you it is not the same, because obviously you can't get that warmth, you can't get that depth of flavour. But I choose not to have it, obviously, and there's probably a part of me that chooses not to have it because it would break my sobriety, wouldn't it? And B, I've never drank since I've become so, obviously, I've not had a slip, if you like.
Yeah.
So, touch wood, please God, I am saying that at that point. But, you know, like you say, then I would feel like I'd have to revert back even if I had that one glass of Baileys, I think.
Do you know what I think is that you can count it however you want, with or without a slip up. I think the issue comes down to if you're a sober coach. If you are a sober influencer with thousands of followers, if you advertise yourself as somebody that helps other people and charges money for that, and then claims to have 4 years sobriety when actually there might have been 3 slip-ups in there, I think that's when the technicalities and the linguistics of it come to the fore, because that's an issue of trust, perhaps, for clients and things like that. So I think you can choose how you want to count it, slip-up or no slip-up. But if you are broadcasting the fact that you've got, a significant amount of sober time, but it hasn't been continuous, then that's almost like false advertising. And then so I think that's where it becomes problematic, is if you are promoting yourself as somebody, who's managed it continually and offering services to other people for a fee. personally. And I just think
I agree.
you can count it in whichever way works for you. And like you said, some people might just choose not to and just have a vague idea or just have that start date and always need to count on the fingers just to work out roughly how far have they gone without a drink. But I think that might be, I think we've hit the nail on the head that that's probably where the disagreement lies with day counts, yes or no, is how forgiving or unforgiving can it be if it's not continuous sobriety. I mean, I've got to admit, Claire, you know, some of the accounts I follow online, and I must follow, I don't know, maybe 700 accounts. And I always find it a little bit sad if I see somebody who says, "Oh, back to day one." I don't feel like I can comment. I know, and I don't, but I almost feel like I need to sort of take a little step back, whereas we should be supporting and encouraging, but to protect myself, I sort of feel a bit like I can't come over and just say, "You'll be fine, carry on." I just sort of observe it and think, "Oh, I really feel terribly bad for that person that they're back in that hell of day one. I really hope they manage it this time." But I'm really wary about surrounding myself with too many people that might be restarting over and over, because I'm so focused on the long term. I'm so focused on my own future. I like to look up to longer day counts. God, that makes me sound really day countist. Like I don't like people who've got fewer days than me, and I don't mean that really. But I think I'm just wary about surrounding myself with too many people that are where I was for so long, basically. And it took me so long to get past that day one, that I just need to surround myself with people who've got longer term sobriety under their belt, because I feel as though I have things in common. There are lessons I've learned that I can relate to more, and those are the posts that I probably value more because I feel as though I can learn more from. And it's a bit of a weird thing to say out loud, I suppose, but I just noticed it in myself. If I see accounts that are slipping up and going back, I just can't engage too much. I just need to sort of keep focusing on myself and longer term sobriety. Does that make sense?
Well, it goes back to that point of, lie down with dogs and get up with fleas, and I don't mean that for the people that are day one, but what it means is you surround yourself with the people that are in the same stage as you.
That is exactly what I mean.
That's
exactly
what you do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very natural
protection thing.
Yeah.
Trying to protect what you've got now.
It means that they've probably learned had the same kind of thoughts, feelings, experiences that they'll have gone through that. They'll have gone through that anger stage. They'll have gone through that finding themselves stage. They'll have got, and I think it's that level of, I'm not going to say understanding, because that puts those people down that are at the very, very start of their journey, which is absolutely, you're in gear one, you're strong.
Yes, stay there.
Stay there. Everybody's got to go through that stage, haven't they? But ultimately, you focus on the people that are going, I suppose, a bit like us three now, you've gone past that year stage, and you really are reaping the benefits of sobriety.
Do you know what, Claire? Actually, you just saying that has made me think. My attitude about this probably only applies to online, because if somebody I know here in the town where I live contacted me and said, "Hey, Jane, I've had a listen to your stuff," or "I remember you mentioned you were sober these days. Do you have any resources? I've managed to get to 17 days." Claire, I would turn around and be blowing hooters and trumpets and saying, "Oh my God, that's fantastic. I'm so pleased you've reached out. 17 days is incredible." I know that in real life I would be fully invested and supported in anybody that was counting the days and reaching out for support. I think it's just the sea of stuff online that you sort of have to pick your way through, and therefore I think that's why perhaps my attitude is very cautious to repeated short day counts I see online, compared to if it was someone I saw in person, somebody I actually know, then it would be a different case completely. I'm certain of it.
And I think just going back to that point that we were making about if you broke your sobriety or anything like that, and you saying the people that are influencing other people, and I suppose I'm talking on behalf of the three of us on this podcast, We've shouted about our sobriety to a degree, haven't you? I know you were quiet to start with, but now, obviously, we are shouting about our sobriety. So I suppose if I'd have trundled along and, I don't drink anymore and not made a deal out of it, and then maybe at Christmas I picked up a Baileys and they went, Claire, oh, yeah, she has Baileys at Christmas. Oh, right. Then, I suppose, Matt, I totally blame Ruth, actually, because we've followed her. But I suppose we have followed her lead, really, which is she's so out and proud, isn't she? And she's so, very clear in her perception of, her sobriety. Definitely I am as well. But I think we've been so out there with it, and I am proud to be, absolutely. I mean, I'm proud to be a part of this podcast. I'm proud to say that because of my sobriety, just 3 other people that I now know have become sober as well, which is just huge, isn't it? When you just think that is massive. I hold my sobriety so close to my heart. People will say to me so often, would you ever just have one drink? Would you ever just... And I was like, oh my gosh, my sobriety, I can't even tell you how integral it is to my way of life and how important it is. Yes.
Yeah.
If I had to put it in materialistic form, obviously you can't put a price on a person, but I absolutely love my engagement ring. But if somebody said, it's as precious as in materialistic terms, but what it means, and maybe I need to buy myself another ring for my sobriety. Maybe that's my thing.
Yeah. In terms of the sheer benefits, then that is what it represents, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know, it's a shame Ruth couldn't jump on this one, because I'd be very interested actually in her views.
I'd be in trouble if she was on this one, so it's probably for the best.
Do you know, probably my only single regret, Claire, just I suppose as we sort of wrap this one up, is that my day count app is not really an app. It's literally like a notebook page that just, it does tick along and it does count it, but it's not any of the nice fancy coloured ones with all super graphics and shapes and everything. It's literally just a bunch of lines with an orange header. And I used it actually, shall I tell you how I started using it? As a countdown to a family holiday. I think I had 2 things coming up. A big family holiday that I kept thinking was further in the future than it was, and I think a birthday. And so I typed in those 2 things as a countdown towards, and those events came and went, and I was drinking and whatever, or I stopped drinking close to those events. And then as the time, a few weeks went by, I sort of went back to it and thought, I suppose I could use that as a counter retrospectively. So I tapped in my sobriety date, and that's how it's then led on. So I could, in theory, add loads of other events onto that app of things I'm counting towards, but now I use it solely just to keep track of my days, and it's just really ugly, Claire. I wish it was a prettier app, but in theory I could just download something new, couldn't I, and input that data, but it wouldn't feel real, because I've watched these days tick over manually, Claire, in real time.
It's part of your journey, isn't it? You don't. It's like a scrappy bit of paper that you take around with you all the time, and you kind of, it's that familiar and that nice that you can't get rid of it now. That's it.
A baggy pair of knickers. I don't think it wouldn't feel honest if I now downloaded a super fancy, pretty graphic app and just typed in 632 days. It wouldn't be genuine, because that's me just typing them in all these days later. So I'm going to stick to my baggy pair of knickers app with the big orange heading.
You stick to them.
That's probably my only regret. So should we wrap it up on that one, on baggy knickers? I think we can all relate to.
Baggy knickers. But it's part of your journey, isn't it? And I think that's day count journey.
You do what's right for you, and if counting days helps you, even if you're into 12,522 days instead of doing it in months and years, then you do what's right. And I just love exactly what you said. Any single day without alcohol counts. Thanks for listening to Fizz Free. Find us online on Facebook, YouTube, on X and Instagram, as well as most major streaming platforms. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, the email is fizzfree0, the number 0, @gmail.com.
Don't forget to rate us and to give us a like and a share to spread the word. Changing your relationship with alcohol. Less fizz, more free.